All right, well, good morning. I'm Ken Biberai, and welcome to Coffee with Ken, a thought leadership series at the nexus of business and politics. We are proud to be partnering with CAA speakers again for a live conversation with former Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Good to see you, Senator.
Good to be with you, Ken. Thank you all.
We are doing more of these conversations live and in person, and we're incredibly grateful to LSG. We are here at the Herald Building in Washington, D.C. for this conversation. Grateful for their team in hosting us. Now, Senator, you left the Senate after 14 years, and after leaving in January, it's been totally calm in D.C., nothing out of the ordinary. Do you miss it?
Well, what I miss is the camaraderie I have with both sides. I could talk to both sides, and this is one time you need that more than ever. Someone needs to be able to cross over and say, come on, guys, does that really make sense? Can't we find a little better position on this? And I'll tell you, there's a couple of things with monumental vote being taken today. Yeah. And it's on the CRA from California. And basically, I've talked to Elizabeth, the parliamentarian, who's a beautiful, beautiful person. And she is just as non-biased as anybody that I've ever seen. She'll call, like a referee should call, the balls and strikes. And she's afraid they're going down the slippery slope that she can't approve. So they're going to have to overrule the parliamentarian. And when you do that in the Senate, that is a slippery slope you can't come back from. No different than getting rid of the filibuster. So the Democrats don't have any credibility in talking about it because they want to get rid of the filibuster when they were in power so they could get what they wanted. Everybody wants to. And they have to understand the institution. You know, we are the beacon of hope to keep any type of civility and also any camaraderie and bipartisanship. Without it, the Senate turns into a simple majority of 51 votes that you don't need. You can have, you can have a unicameral there in just one body. And I'm hoping that they have enough get up and go to prevent that. But so every minute of every day, I know exactly what's going on. So right now, I know exactly where they are. And I keep thinking about that. And I keep in contact with them on both sides. They're my friends.
And you were a unique voice in the Senate that was able to kind of stand in the middle, for better or for worse. Are there any Joe Manchins left in the Senate?
Oh, I'm sure they are. They just haven't found it yet. The bottom line was this. I come from a little coal mining town. And coal mining towns are tough towns, okay? We don't know that growing up, but they're lovable, but they demand a lot. They don't let you loaf around. They don't let you basically finagle your way through life. You have to be accountable. And you have to have character pretty young. You have to be able to stand up and look at somebody and say, I didn't do good last night playing ball. I could have done better. Because they won't let you in Sam's pool room. On Saturday, if you didn't do good on Friday night, you didn't go to Sam's. Well, Sam's pool room is the best hot dogs in the world, okay? Best pinball machines in the world, best pool tables in the world, and the best card games in the world. We had to learn all of those. That was a part of growing up in Farmington. So it kind of grounded you. And I've always said this, I looked at everything, could I go back to Farmington and explain it? So it got to the point where all my Senate colleagues on both sides, they said, Joe, I know if you can't explain it, you're not going to vote for it. And I said, you're absolutely right. I don't know where you came from, but could you explain this crap you're about ready to vote for? Or can you defend what you're trying to do when you know it's not right? So those types of things there kept me grounded. So I never changed. I've been in politics since 1982. I said, I'm fiscally responsible and socially compassionate. And I think most Americans are. I don't care whether you have a D by your name, an R by your name, or you're a no party affiliation like I am now, an independent. Let me tell you the thing that we're dealing with in America today that no one's even thinking about this. How little opportunities we have to participate in the elected form of democracy. We represent individuals. We're going to basically govern ourselves. And that's an experiment. 240 years ago, they thought, never been done. I don't know if it'll work or not. We'll try it. So here we go. Guess what right now? Out of all the people, let's say we have 160 million people that'll vote in a general election. On a really good general election, 160 million. That means they're all registered somewhere to vote, right? 23% are registered Democrats, 26% are registered Republicans, 51% no party affiliations. Now let's go down to the states. How come only when you look at the primary on a general election like the last one, maybe 22 or 23 million people total on both sides voted in a primary. So only 23 million out of 160 million decided who we were going to have as an option. And you know why? the duopoly of businesses, and a duopoly, like a monopoly, you have a business of a Democrat and Republican business. That's a duopoly. They're able to control through the primary process. So if I shut my primaries down and you're a registered independent, now I can't vote in my state of West Virginia in the primary because Republicans says, oh, you have to be registered Republican. Democrats in the real red and the real blue state want to be registered Democrats. They control. So then when you think about when you get here, why was all the money, majority of the money spent in 7 swing states? 43 states were unscathed. A little bit of money was spent, but not big on a national level because they were already predetermined. They're going to go red or they're going to go blue. But the 7 swing states is where all the attention, that's all you heard about the last 6 months. But yet, when they make a decision and they get here, they go back to the respective corners because their business model doesn't work if you have to continue play with the 7 swing states, okay?
So you've been actively talking about ranked choice voting, and I think you've been
I'm talking about all type of primaries. Yeah, but ranked choice, the only thing I said about ranked choice is I know that my friend Lisa Murkowski would never get elected in Alaska. I know that my friend Susan Collins would have a hard time in Maine because they would be targeted. Susan would be targeted in 2026. She'll be targeted, okay? They can't get her. Chuck Schumer tried to get her, and I said, you're crazier than hell, Chuck. I said, I said, and let me tell you how hypocritical. They all know that I work on both sides real well. And the way you work on both sides, you put yourself in uncomfortable positions. So you know how we have our cloakroom behind. The Senate has its cloakroom with the Democrats, and the Senate has its cloakroom for the Republicans. And it used to be, I heard in the old days, they used to kind of traverse back and forth. So I made it a point. I go over to the Republican cloakroom. They said, oh, here goes Joe. And I said, well, let's sit down and talk to him. Well, come on, guys, let's boom, boom. I said, well, I like your peanuts are better over here. Or whatever, give me a reason to go. And then back and forth. And then, so I would always break that monotony and get people talking a little bit and getting them working. And there's no one willing to do that because a lot of the leadership looks at that. You know, it used to be like when you were growing up, if you were associating with someone with unsavory character, you were guilt by associations. In Washington, you're almost guilt by conversation. They see you talking to somebody. And this made me so outraged. I said, this is crazy. I said, how are we ever going to get anything done? And so then I was always famous. I had a guy who made moonshine for me. Dave, honest to God, he did. This is a funny story. I got to tell it to you real quick. This story here, Dave, for 20 years, he's making moonshine. He'd always say, here, Joe, I know you, because I always like that. That's kind of part of the Mountain Laurel, you know, that I want you to have a little taste of this white lightning. It'll lighten you right up. And anyways, this kind of breaks the ice, and we did that all the time. So he said, they call it the hooch. I got some hooch for you, Joe. I said, okay. So we get the new hooch and everything come in. So one day, West Virginia said you can make recreational moonshine. Now it's legal. And Dave says, Joe, I said, Dave, let's get legal now. I said, you know, I've been supporting illegal operation here for a long time, and I like to have it legal. He says, okay. So I said, Dave, he said, Joe, I don't know how to do paperwork. And I said, we'll do all the paperwork for you. I'll get you legal. I said, I need a name for the organization. What do you call your moonshine? He says, Joe, farm fuel. I said, farm fuel? He said, Joe, I swear to God, tractor runs out of gas, put this in it, and that damn thing will purr like a kitten. And he was right. It was hotter than firecracker. So and everyone loved it, farm fuel.
That's amazing. Well, staying on that thread for a second, right? And we're going to get to the new book you have coming out.
Yeah.
But even when we were chatting earlier, you always had a common sense approach, like have a cup of coffee, have a drink. I think you were a little famous for having your residence was at the wharf, I think, named Almost Heaven, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm the only person ever been attacked by canoes.
We were going to ask about the security risks of that. But how important was that, right? Like when we started this series, the whole goal was to just sit down, have a cup of coffee, share ideas, and give folks the opportunity to just talk, right? Like,
yeah.
And it feels like that's how you ran things in your career in the Senate.
Well, I always heard, you know, I got involved in 1982. I was 35 years old when I got involved in the political process, never intended to. But I saw a person who's representing my area of West Virginia, and I thought the person was self-serving, not public service. So in doing that, I said, that guy's he's not doing his job right. So I ran and got elected, and every time I'm one of 100, and then if I become a state senator, I'd be one of 34. And a very simplistic approach, I'm thinking, I'd be 3 times as powerful to help more people. And then if I become governor, I'd be one of one. I could really do some stuff. So I went up the ladder and I got defeated in 96. I lost 1 race in my career in the primary. It was probably the best thing ever happened to me because I didn't do a good job. And I always remember, you ever run into people that always blame someone else for losing a race? You guys did this, you turned on me this, you did this and this. And I'm thinking, I'm sitting there and I saw the returns coming in and my son was sitting beside me. Family was distraught, I could tell. And I looked at my son and I said, honey, we've been very fortunate. We've won a lot of races so far. We're going to lose this one tonight. And we're going to show people what a little bit of class is. We're not going to show our ass. We're going to show a little class. And I got up and says, it was all my fault. I didn't communicate well. I didn't organize well. I didn't get my message across. I can do better. But I thought I was done. And then the people that really came after me and defeated me came back because they backed the person that couldn't win the general election. And they come back and said, will you try it again? I said, if I do try it again, you're going to do it my way, not your way. I says, I made a mistake. I'm not making that again. So I didn't blame anybody. I just changed how I wanted to do. I thought public service is, I'm a John Kennedy type of believer it's the noblest of all professions. That's not what your country can do for you, what you can do for your country. And that's how I've lived my political life. And I've never changed from it. And I made some decisions a lot of people didn't like, but I said, I never wanted you to walk away and said, I don't know why Joe did that. He never gave me a good explanation. I'll give you an explanation. You might not like it. And I've always said this, if you can't change your mind, you can't change anything. So if you come and say, Joe, but I think you're wrong on that. Have you checked out this? Have you looked at this fact? And I said, let me check it out. And I checked it. I says, you're right. And I'll change. And the only thing I tell Democrats right now, just say you made a mistake on the border. That's all. During COVID, you open it up. Joe Biden is a very compassionate person. He just opened the gates up thinking he'd help the rest of the world, have some respite. He made a mistake. We never done that before. Just say you did it and say, listen, I want to work with President Trump. I want to work with him to secure the border and be tough on crime so we can live in a more safer environment. But I want the president to work with me on illegal immigration reform. The country can't make it unless we have people that are coming here and want to come here for the right reason. They got a perfect segue. They won't take it because they can't admit what they did. That's the problem.
So our politics are just so entrenched. And you referenced that you've always stayed the course. You've been true to yourself. But it feels like you think the party maybe left you. And last year you took the initiative of actually becoming an independent after being a Democrat.
Here's what I knew about the party. From the D, in rural America, the D, having a D identifier is toxic. It is toxic. You just can't survive. And the reason it's toxic because you have average working people. When an average working person believes that a certain party supports and represents and spends more time and effort, more resources on people that are able-bodied, capable of working, that won't work or don't work versus those who do work. And when there's a working person from a mine or a factory, people I grew up with, go to the grocery store and they see people who aren't working, having support from the government that are eating better than they are and making an effort to work, it just resonates and it goes through a community and they says, the hell with them. And then we lost it with Barack Obama. Forget about racial. It wasn't racial at all. It was basically that he, in their eyes, and me being governor at the time, the war on coal was real from this standpoint. The markets are changing. It's going to change. Coal's not going to be what it was. And I try to prepare everybody for that. But we have to do it through a transitional way so you don't harm anybody intentionally. And what happened is they started putting rules and regulations out that were unattainable. And they didn't have the technology to do what they wanted to do. And you had to have the energy. So I said, if it's not reasonable, it's not feasible. You can't do what you want us to do. And I just said, you just got to be very careful how you transition. If you can tell someone no with a tear in your eye, you got to get bad news. Whether you're changing your work habits, where you're changing your employment base, whether you're making some difficult decisions, you can say no with a tear in your eye. And that means this: do I feel it as bad, receiving bad information as you're giving it to me? If I think that you're giving it to me out of delight, I'll guarantee you're going to pay a price for it. If I think you're as hurt as I am, I'd do anything, but I've got to tell you where we are today and do it with compassion. You're going to be okay. It's a tough day, but you're going to be okay. They can't do that. They just don't do that. And, you know, I don't know. It's just a tough situation. It's human nature. You want people that are likable. And if you show me a person that's running for office that's not a likable person, and I can show you someone won't go very far. You show someone who is likable and you meet him, man, that was a nice guy. That's a nice lady. She really handles herself. She's smart as a whip. Boom, boom, boom. You're going to be fine. You might lose a few. You might take a few bumps, but you'll be fine.
Let's get back to live happenings in Washington. Okay. You are a fiscal hawk. There is a big, beautiful bill working its way through Congress. How would you approach that? What are your thoughts on the deficit and where we are economically?
I've never seen a beautiful bill.
You've never seen it?
And I'll tell you the reason why. It wasn't designed that way. The most deliberate, you know, it's not going to be beautiful. I use an analogy like this, but, you know, you have to know President Trump. Yeah. Let me tell you, he is engaging. When you meet him, you'll like him. You know, he's fine. It just, oh, man, you're the most wonderful person. How you did this. I heard about this. Just makes you feel like, oh, boy, he really knows who I am. I've only had, out of 5 presidents, 2 that were like that. Bill Clinton and him. I got along with everybody else, but I had 2 that were truly engaging and grabbed you, and those 2. So he has that likability. What's going on right now, we've got a financial crisis in America. We have never been a GDP to debt where we are today, even after World War II. We've never been in these. These are uncharted waters. And when they're using funny numbers in order to make it look like we don't have really a debt, and that's not a debt, that's pure bullshit, and they know that. And these are my friends. Mike Crapo is just such a solid guy. Okay, and I know, and I've been talking to Mike. There's so many gimmicks that have been played. How in the world, and you all are right in the thick of things here, how in the world do we accumulate so much debt when every time you hear about a bill we have to pay for? How are you going to pay for this? Okay, well, that's paid for. How in the hell have we accumulated 36 going on $37 trillion of debt when we've paid for everything? I'll tell you exactly how they do it. Basically, we tell you a bill's going to be, okay, we want to do this, this, and this in the bill. And CBO scores it, and they look at what we want to do, and they look at the trends that's been going on. They're really kind of educated guesstimates. No one knows exactly. But if you want to hold your feet to the fire, and I've told Mike Crapo, and I've written a language for this too. I says, Mike, I can tell you what's happening. Take the IRA. We said it's going to be about a $700 billion bill. Do any of you all know that $230 billion of that went directly to paying down debt from the Treasury? Did you ever hear the president say anything about that? President Biden never said a word. Nothing. Did they tell you also during the Biden administration, and these are all my friends and we just disagree, did they ever tell you that basically we've produced more energy than ever in the history of the United States of America? You didn't hear it from them. They wouldn't say it. They were telling you what a wonderful environmental bill. Well, it was intended to do 2 things. First of all, it was all about energy security, the IRA was. And next of all, it was about producing the energy we need today and investing in energy we want for tomorrow. That was it. Simple as can be. And they made it all one-sided, and they lost the reality of what the bill actually did. So, you know, I go through all those things, and I have to say, guys, I'm sorry. You're wrong on that. And I told John Podesta, a friend of mine, I said, John, you're trying to implement a bill through rules, a bill you never passed. I wrote the bill. I know that's not in the bill because you just read the bill. So I've told every industry, every manufacturer who might have been harmed for how the bill came out, the IRA, I said, if you've been harmed by basically making your investments based on how we wrote the bill versus how they implemented from Treasury or Energy or EPA, I want you to sue. I would sue myself. I can't. As a senator, I can't sue because I'm not damaged. You've been damaged, and I'll do the amicus brief in my committee, and you'll win every one in court. So I've told them. They knew what we were doing. So what they're doing now, repealing some of them, they needed to. But if they're not careful, they're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater because that bill kept us from falling into a recession. We didn't send the check to anybody. We made you earn it through investment tax credit or production tax credits. There was basically, you had to have something that was already commercially proven, just hadn't been matured, whether it be hydrogen, rare earth, all the different things, SMRs, geothermal, all of these things. So I don't know, guys. It's a tough one, but you have to be able to hold your own. You have to be able to go toe to toe, and you have to know what the hell you're doing. And with that, people will respect it. They might not agree with you, but they're going to respect it. And I think I've never tried to ever embarrass anybody or harm anybody. First of all, I never campaigned against a sitting colleague, Democrat or Republican. I've never written a check out of my PAC against a sitting colleague. Now, Democrats and Republicans both expect you out of your PAC to be for whoever's running against someone on the other side. These are people my friends, I'm having dinner with them, I'm inviting down the boat, and all of a sudden, I'm supposed to go write a check to Donald Duck, who's running against him in whatever state, because they're a Republican and they want a Democrat there. And so not only did I not do that on Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, I would go to their states and campaign and write checks for them. And that really pissed everybody off. But I'm telling them, this is the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, I want to tease out a little bit more on the IRA, the rollout, implementation. So I know most people will be shocked by this, but I don't just drink coffee for a living. I actually do real estate site selection for manufacturing companies. So I've been traveling the country, competing states, and it's been this amazing moment where the geography of opportunity for manufacturing seems broader than ever. People are building factories in Nevada and West Virginia and Arizona and Texas. And when you go to these places, it's never politics. It's not like this was Biden's blood. People, the communities just want good jobs. They want projects. They want to improve their communities. How do you see this playing out at this moment where it seems like we're having a resurgence in manufacturing? Like,
well,
what do we need to do to keep the momentum going?
You're going to have a slowdown too, Kim, because basically if the
I'm drinking coffee, Joe.
I'd be drinking some moonshine if I was you. Incentives. The incentives, if the incentives aren't there, we gave you a 10-year window.
Yeah.
I didn't finish the last thought. What happens when a $700 billion bill over 10 years? When you do a bill and you have a 10-year spread, that means 10 years you'll raise this much money to pay for the bill, and you'll spend this much. Doesn't have any guardrails on spending. So what happens? Something's extremely popular. The bill comes out. It's supposed to be a $700 billion bill. It's so popular by 4 years into the bill, we run out of money. We've done through the 700. Now we're another 500 short. Guess what happens? We keep spending because we have spending authority. We just don't have any reappropriation authority to stop it and go back. So I've said this, just write it to when you hit the CBO score, you stop right there. You have to go back to reauthorize or the program stops. That puts everything, that's the barometer of how you basically equalize things back to something that we were supposed to do, be fiscally responsible. So we haven't. That's a way to fix that.
Yeah.
On the other thing you're talking about, on this whole bill, right now, if the president, and I would say this, and I've spoken to Doug Burgum and I spoke to Chris Wright, are two good, he's got some good people in his administration.
Secretary of Interior and Energy.
Energy and all them. They're good to work with, and they're really, they get it. And I've explained to them the fallacies of what happened to the bill, how they tried to implement it. And I've said, this is how I think you should fix it. If President Trump would say, listen, I got a beautiful bill here. It's energy. It's an all-energy policy. We're going to call it the Energy Security Act of 2025. The Donald Trump Security Act of 2025, energy security. Great. Look at the things we did, and I'll give you one. He's hot on EVs now, getting rid of them. The hard thing about EVs was this. I'm old enough to remember. I love vehicles. I love anything that makes noise and goes fast, okay? So I never remember in my life the federal government ever sending anybody, my parents or anybody, a check to buy a car. I never remembered that. I saw the auto industry give us incentives, discounts, zero interest, $1,700. I mean, I sent all of those things, but not the federal government. But all of a sudden, General Motors and Ford said, we can't make it unless you give us $7,500 credit, which is bullshit. And I told him, I said, I want to give you 75 cents. If you make a better product than what I'm buying now, I'm going to buy your product. If you give me more of an incentive, I'll buy it sooner. That's the way it works. And then they want to spend $80 billion was one of the requests from the far left to build charging stations. I said, whoa, wait a minute. I went back and checked my history books, and I never remember when Henry Ford, basically, the mass production as far as the assembly line, I don't remember the federal government says, we got to go out and build some gas stations now. I couldn't find that in the history books. I said, you believe in the market, then the market will supply. It always has, always will. They didn't. They were trying to force their personal agenda, ideology. We're getting this out. We're getting this out. And they basically just eviscerated. So I'm okay with what the president is doing. I'm not okay how they do it. I'm okay because they're not explaining it. So if he's able to look at that and start slicing and dicing and then he'll see he can't get rid of a lot of the things. The people came because of this. When we wrote the IRA, and they know that, I wrote it in secrecy, and my staff, there's 20 of us. No one knew in March, April, May, not until June, that we had something. Well, you just don't come up one day and have a bill like that. We've been working on it for 4 months. The bad thing was we couldn't reach out to all you professionals because I didn't get the crap beat out of me for 8 months on the BBB, which I could not support. And then I can go into that forever, but you'll read about it. You'll read about it later. Anyway, so we got to where we got to, and they said, you got something? Well, let me tell you. In June, President's numbers were about 23%, 25% maybe popularity, 9.1% on inflation, and gas was at $5. I get a phone call. You got anything? I got something. You're not going to like it because you're going to have to produce more energy than you ever produced in the history of this country for us to have what we need to get our act going again and help our allies. We couldn't help our allies. You understand? When the Ukraine war, and the only reason you have the IRA, the only reason I did that bill was because of the Ukraine war. And remember, there's a song, Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places. They're going to be looking for energy in all the wrong places, our friends and allies. And it's going to be hard to wean them away once they have to go somewhere else to find energy. That's why I did the bill. I'll never forget, I'm sitting with my staff, and all you must, I know a lot of you have been staffers, and you all are smarter than the members. I know that, okay? And so I'm sitting there with my staff, and they said, Joe, you can't do this. You just can't do it. You can't do another bill. And they're looking at it politically. After we killed the BBB, not my one vote would not give them the BBB moving forward, because it was just too much to ingest. It would have killed us. A recession, it could have thrown the world into a depression. And I told the president, it's how I walked away from the president. We didn't talk for 3 months after this. I'm in the White House, and I said, Mr. President, you passed this piece of signature bill you want me to sign on to pass it for you. Then what we have done is we changed the philosophy of John Kennedy. Asked not what you can do for your country, what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. You're changing the psychic of our nation. How much more will my country do for me? I said, I can't do it. So that's how we got to where we did to. And then I told him, I said, I got something. I said, you're not going to like it. I said, because you are not going to be able to put a wind farm or a solar farm anywhere on BLM land or territorial waters unless we're extracting the mineral under our feet. We've got to have what we have in the ground in order to produce what you want in emissions. I've got to do both. So that's how we did it. And Macron came after me and Schultz after we passed that bill because everybody was coming to America to invest.
Yeah.
They looking at these credits, and it's just like a magnet. And they came to me and says, why did you do this to our countries? And I said, whoa, wait a minute. Do you think that we ever had one word of how could we harm our friends and allies in France and Germany? Absolutely not. I said, you've used a stick. I've been in Washington for almost 15 years, and every year they beat me up on, we should have carbon fees. The only way we're going to fix the climate is carbon taxes and carbon fees. I said, I've never seen one work. I said, what are you going to do with the proceeds? They've been thinking proceeds are rolled back into Treasury and use it for all their spending priorities. Has nothing to do with how do I incentivize you to do something to fixes the carbon problem. How can I produce more energy carbon-free or carbonless? That was the whole purpose. So I said, you used the stick, Mr. President and Mr. Chancellor, and I used the carrot. And I think we've seen which one works the best. And that's how we got there.
Amazing. Just to stay on energy just for a moment,
Sure.
Right? You have a philosophy of, all of the above as it relates to energy. And when the IRA passed, it was before this voracious demand of AI that we're seeing today. How are we doing on the generation of power? What more do we need to do? We see it everywhere we go. The demand for power is the first question.
And I would like to see President Trump, and I think this will happen. He'll have to transition into this. He can't go into where we're stopping renewables, okay? Hydrogen is the only thing that had horsepower to run the country. So if you're going off of oil and gas, what else can run a machine? What can run a factory? What can run an airplane? What can run buses and trucks and everything? Hydrogen can do it. Hydrogen can never compete with cheap oil and gas. That's all. So unless you can get into the second and third generation of electrolyzers to break down the hydrogen, then you're not going to compete. And we never could get there because the prices have just prevented that from happening. So I hope he looks at, we need more of all-in energy than ever before. We need our friends in Canada that can do things and support us. I talked to the Canadian group last night and I said, we're in a situation where it's almost like a family. And you got 3 siblings. You've got a big brother or a big sister who's done very well in life. And you have another brother or another sister that's trying to do better. But, you know, they said, well, I don't need to do that because my big brother and my big sister's doing that. She's done so well in life, and she'll take care of that. So here's the United States. We're that big brother or big sister. Here's Canada and here's Mexico. And Canada's kind of ridden on our coattails, says, my sister, she'll make sure nothing happens to me. She'll take care of me defensively. So they don't put any money towards defense. And they're having the family reckoning right now. And for some reason, we had Mexico, the USMC, if we're going to trade back and forth, then that back and forth is only going to be traded duty-free as long as it's sourced there. If you're not sourcing it there, and if you're bootlegging stuff through, then my other little brother down in Mexico maybe says, I didn't see that hang through. We're okay because we're still making money off of that too. Come on. The family got to get back together. Let's get back, and they will. They'll correct that. We've got to have this North American continent be the most resourceful, the most productive, the most financially solvent in the whole world that we've ever seen. And we're on the cusp of that.
Well, you have a new book coming out in September, in this fall. It's called Dead Center. What do you want folks to know about that book before it comes out?
You've got to dodge and weave if you're dead center. I can tell you that. You got to move quick. It's basically going to say, never lose your values. Never lose, and don't be afraid to look a person in the eye and say, listen, I'm so sorry. I just see it differently. And if I'm seeing something wrong, please help me see it differently. So I've said this, I've never met the first person, we all of it, that's always right. But I've never met the first person that's always wrong either. Let me just tell you the person that we think that's wrong. They might be batshit crazy. And you might say, that's stupid, son. Ah, man. And then you know what? If you'd have stayed a little bit longer, you'd have got something value. You have to ask the right questions. You didn't stay there long enough. You just wrote them off too quick. And so I think in that, having the respect, I've always done this. There's 49 other states in West Virginia. Whoever you send me from your state, respect the state, whether it be out Kansas and Idaho or wherever it may be, I respect the process of how that person got as my colleague in the Senate. And I respect the process so well that I'm going to do everything I can to help that person be successful. Okay? So I have a hard time saying no to somebody when they said, Joe, I got an idea. They said, a few of my friends once said, Joe, you just string us along. I said, no, I didn't. I tried to find a way to say yes to you, and I couldn't do it. Oh. Stringing you along was when I know I'm never going to say yes. I was willing to say yes. You didn't have the facts to convince me to say yes. But I was trying. They wanted to adjust the filibuster. I looked at everything humanly possible. I looked at everything in history, how we got to where we got to, and the purpose of the filibuster. It comes down to this in the filibuster. There's 13 states when we formed this great union. 1789, someone had to walk out of the Constitution and tell big bad Massachusetts, big bad New York, big bad Virginia, we're going to have a bicameral type of government. We're going to have a House and a Senate, okay? And with that, I want to tell you all, you're going to have 2 members. Everyone has 2 members in the Senate. And can you imagine at that time, Massachusetts, you're telling me that Delaware is going to have the same amount and they can do nothing for this economy, and you run this whole country on my back, and I've got to, that's bullshit. And they said, nope. Now, George Washington, I'm putting George at a higher standard. He had to say, listen, guys, I don't want the big guys beating up on the little guys. This is going to be United States. We're not going to continue to be divided. And we're not going to be colonies anymore. We're going to be states.